Hello, people of the internet. This is the Trans Trekkie. I am a Transformers fan and a Trekkie, which is what makes me a Trans Trekkie. And welcome to the second episode of May Divorce Be With You. Today I am talking about what I call the next logical step. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of times people get into relationships and they stay in relationships and continue the relationships just because they feel like that's the next logical progression of that relationship. Um, I certainly think, kind of drawing from my own experience here, I really feel like that is one of the things that happened with my ex-wife and I. Um, we were coworkers first, and then we went out, we started dating, and there weren't. Uh, I mean, it was fine. There wasn't anything. It wasn't like we were ever like madly in love with each other or passionately, you know, like excessive displays of PDA. Not like you need to have that, but um, I mean, it was fine. Like everything was going fine. There weren't any massive problems. We argued every once in a while. I don't really think we argued any worse or any more or less than any other couple. Um, there certainly wasn't any. Um, it wasn't like there were any things like abuse or anything like that going on. Certainly. It was just, things were normal and they seemed normal. And so the next normal thing to do just kind of seemed to be that's essentially what this video is about, the next logical step. Um, like I said, we were coworkers, and we'd been talking about our interests, and we were saying we both like movies, so we went to go see a movie, and then we started dating, and that was fine. There weren't any like huge red flags for either one of us, so we continued dating, and then after a while, she moved in with me. Again, that seemed like the next logical step. Uh, in for the relationship, and then after a while, um, at the time, I really felt like I really did was enjoying our lives together, and I really believed that I wanted that to continue for the rest of my life. And so that was why I had made the decision to propose to her. And so, um, again, it was that next logical step like, okay, we're in this relationship, we're living together, things are fine. So the next, what's the next step? Get married, formalize it. Um, Actually, at one point, I had the proposal video. I proposed to her at Disneyland. This was before Galaxy's Edge had opened, but we're both Star Wars fans, and so I had proposed to her in front of Star Tours, and um, and she had no idea that it was coming, and um, but yeah, so I had my parents were there, and they were my mom was taking the video of it. Yeah, I had that up here on YouTube at one point, but since the divorce, I have since taken it down just because, yeah, I don't necessarily need that reminder every time I log into my YouTube. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it was just it's our relationship was such that I just didn't, there weren't ever any, um, there wasn't anything that like any problems that really felt like they were worth ending the relationship or yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. It's not like and I don't think we were ever so dispassionate to the point where either of us was really just like, okay, like, let's, like maybe we should just, this is going to work better if we're just friends or anything like that. It was just, here's the relationship. It's going fine. There's nothing wrong. Let's just keep going. I think another part of what goes into this, falling into this trap is, um, I think most of us are raised with the understanding that relationships are difficult and it takes work, and that if you really want to have that epic love story that is a love story for the ages, I guess, that you have to work at it. You have to you know you have to you basically you have to put in the work in order for it to succeed and to continue. And on some level, I think it creates this culture where if the relationship fails, it means that somebody wasn't willing to do the work. That there was some sort of a failure somewhere, and that it's almost like ending a relationship is maybe kind of a sign of laziness, I guess, um, or failure. Um, and again, with my recent experience in this, I certainly don't think that's true. I think, but I think certainly think it's one of those things that contributes to people staying in relationships because it's like maybe you're in a relationship with somebody that you like them fine, but maybe it's not great as a romantic relationship, but maybe it would work better as a friendship. But instead of doing that, it's if you're already in that dating relationship, our society is one that shows that has a the standard is basically that if that romantic relationship fails, it's because the two people weren't willing to put in the work that it takes to make a relationship succeed. And if there's nothing particularly terrible going on, or there isn't some sort of huge red flag or something like that, I think a lot of people, and again, I certainly think this was my wife and I, that we fell into that trap where we just kind of stayed in the relationship when really it we really just should have just been like work acquaintances. Like we really shouldn't even have dated in hindsight. And I know when we did get divorced, I had not been happy for a long time. I was at a point where I was waking up every morning wondering what would be the best case scenario for this, as for both of us as two alive humans, to come out of this as still two alive humans, barring situations like a car crash or a car accident, plane crash, robots, zombies, aliens, the usual stuff. um, and consistently, my every day, my logical conclusion on that was that she would essentially wind up doing something so bad that it would wind up justifying me ending the marriage. And when she cheated on me, she basically gave me what I wanted, which was a way out. Um, but I certainly think that part of that is and I think that mentality, it kind of goes into what I'm saying. It's that I was essentially waiting for something bad enough to justify leaving the marriage. And in hindsight, I realize not being happy is enough of a justification for that. The fact that we really never should have been in a relationship to begin with, that we weren't really compatible in a romantic relationship, but we were perfectly fine as, coworkers and friends. It really should have just stayed as coworkers and friends. At some point, I think maybe I should have just said, like, I like you. This is, but I'm not. I want us to just, keep the relationship as, on a friendship level or on a professional level or what have you, rather than, like I said, going through what I think a lot of us see as that next logical step. You know, it. So I think that's, and I think a lot of people, do that. They wind up, they stay in relationships because, again, they've done that next logical step, and, it's like now you're in a relationship, and it's like now you feel that pressure to put in the effort and try and make it work, when really it's, two people are not compatible on that level and should really just agree to, that they don't necessarily have to go to that next logical step. When you're, like if I'm, spending time with a woman, or, getting to know her, it doesn't necessarily have to turn romantic. Or, if it does turn romantic, but, maybe the passion's not there, or, the mutual interests aren't there, or what have you, it's perfectly fine to say, you know, that it's, you think the relationship, it would be perfectly fine for me to say, you know, I think this relationship would work better as a friendship rather than, a romantic relationship. And, I think doing that would certainly, leave the door open to, getting into a relationship with somebody who I really, have more in common with, where, we do share the same interests and have the same values. And it really is going to feel like it's more of, two people sharing their lives together rather than, just having stayed together in a relationship that, is fine on the face of it, but not really what but it's just that way just because that's what's expected. And, um, that's just, I think that, that's one of the things that I learned from my marriage is just, you don't necessarily have to take that next logical step just because it is seen as the next logical step, you know. Um, but anyway, that's my takeaway from, that aspect of our relationship. It's, one of the things that I've learned for myself going forward is that I certainly am going to be more selective about, who I actually get into romantic relationships with, and as opposed to, keeping certain relationships either as friendships or, professional levels, or what have you. Um, when, it'll kind of prevent from falling into that trap of, just winding up in a relationship rather than, you know, actively seeking to get into that relationship with somebody that is somebody you're gonna, that I would have a better, where I'd be enjoying my life with them rather than. Anyway, that's my takeaway. Let me know what you think down in the comments, or your experiences, and um, if you've been in, one of those relationships, or if you're in a relationship and, you're just kind of staying in it because you feel like that's what's expected. Feel free to, comment in the leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.